What's up, everyone? This is Raphael Garcia here again for another week of the MMA Ratings Podcast. I'm not sure where Roy has vanished to. I know he works a lot, so he may be indisposed for today's show. So that means it will be just me again talking to you about the world of combat sports. And luckily for me, there was a lot going on this week, so I'll have enough to talk about. A lot happened over the weekend, and we have a pretty good card looking forward this Saturday. Actually, Bellator and UFC have some shows going on this week, so we're going to talk about as much as we possibly can. I thank you for joining me at our new time at 11 o'clock. Football season is going on and strong, so we're not going to try to compete with that. So if you're listening to us, check us out while you're working on your fantasy football rosters right now, which is something I need to be doing myself, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into this. Let's talk about what happened over in Japan with UFC Fight Night Hunt versus Nelson. So Mark Hunt got the win. He knocked out Roy Nelson in the second round. He's the first man to ever knock out Big Country, which I was pretty surprised to hear. But I look at this fight and I'm not surprised it ended the way it did. I actually thought that Roy Nelson would take the win, but the way he fights, it plays into how Mark Hunt basically hits heavy, and he can catch anybody with a counter shot, which is basically what happened here. But what does this really do for the heavyweight division? I mean, Mark Hunt, he was on a pretty good run, so he ran into Junior Dos Santos, and he took that brutal knockout last year. So what does this really do for the group as a whole? I'm going to actually talk about this later, but I think it definitely adds value to Mark Hunt, but it doesn't really do anything for the whole group. The heavyweight division is in a bad spot. There aren't really too many guys who would bring any attention to the weight class right now. Cain Velasquez is sitting at the top, and he's set to face for Fabricio Werdum on, I believe, in December at UFC 180, or that's November, I think. But either way, that's probably like that's the next time we'll see him. But we only get to see that guy about one time a year. So what really is going on with the heavyweight weight class? Again, like I said, we'll talk about that later on in the show, but it's something I definitely want to bring up as it relates to Mark Hunt being able to get the win over Nelson over in Japan. Probably the most important win of this card was Miles Jury. He took a victory over Takanori Gomi, and Miles has kind of been flying under the radar per se. He's been on a good run in the UFC, but he doesn't necessarily have that type of style that catches everybody's attention. This was a good knockout win for him, good, nice and quick too. Under 2 minutes. So he's been doing more than enough. He's 15-0. He's won. Let me see, 1, 2, 3. He's won 6 straight fights as a lightweight in the UFC. So right now you got to wonder what they plan on doing with this guy, because he's beaten Michael Johnson, who's someone who was kind of rising up the weight class, and he even took a win over a name like Diego Sanchez. So he has some quality wins on his resume, but the UFC hasn't really made mention of him being pretty much a name in the contenders group. So you got to wonder if they plan on doing anything with him immediately coming into the close of 2014 or early 2015. His fighting style actually makes it interesting to me to see if he will be placed against Habib Nurmagomedov, because they both use that grappling heavy style to where they score a lot of takedowns, but they also throw value on the feet. So that could be a pretty interesting fight there, with the winner maybe getting placed in a title eliminator later on or early next year. But Nurmagomedov's out for a couple more months with that knee injury he suffered. I don't think he'll be back until early 2015. So that's kind of a scheduling concern. But I would still like to see that fight. I think, like I mentioned, Miles is someone that's flying under the radar, and he's getting better every time he fights, in my opinion. So I would like to see what's next for him. He's training out of Alliance, where they have a lot of good guys are actually putting together some pretty good runs. So, and he's only 25 years old too, and so I just think this guy's really flying under the radar. He needs some more attention, and eventually to see what kind of fight that he gets next in the lightweight division. Yoshihiro Akiyama, Setsuyama returns to the cage for the first time in years. And this guy, he's always been interesting to me. Against goodness, I just drew a blank. His first fight against Alan Belker all those years ago. It was 5 years ago where those who fought at UFC 100. Then he loses four straight fights, and UFC still kept him around, and they welcomed him back last night at UFC Fight Night, and he's got the win over Amir Sadala, someone else who's also been gone for an extended period of time. I really don't think this fight has any value to the division as a whole. It's more of a showcase fight, so the fans over in Japan could see someone that they knew who was a star and someone that they definitely enjoyed watching. So it was a good win for him. It'll keep him around, and he'll be someone that can kind of stay in the UFC to keep competing in these fights that are held in the Asian countries where they need someone who can kind of rally the fans, someone that the fans can get excited about, and Akiyama is definitely one of those type of guys. And then we also had Misha Tate and Renaki. A lot of people picked Misha as soon as this fight was announced, and that's exactly what happened. She took the unanimous decision win. And Tate, this is her second win in the octagon. She actually has an interview up on Sherdog where she's calling out Kat Zingano. She wants a rematch with her, and I actually kind of like that fight. I don't think she'll get it. I think if Kat wins against Amanda Nunes, then she'll get the title shot that she was originally promised almost more than a year ago. So Tate is kind of sitting on the outside looking in. She's already lost the Rousey twice, and it was definitive losses both times. So she probably won't be getting a title shot anytime soon. So she should be floating around the women's bantamweight division quite like John Fitch was for a while, and Kenny Thorne was too, just floating around and beating people who are either on a run or someone like Ren who's just stepping into the octagon for the first time. So, and that's not a bad spot to be, because Tate has the ability to beat a lot of the women in the UFC's roster right now. I think she's a hard matchup for just about anyone at this point in time, and she can continue using that position to make money. Like I said, I always say these athletes are prize fighters first, and Tate is in a position where she can make as much money as she possibly can right now. I know she was just signed to I want to say it was Tony Stewart's management company recently, which is going to open up some new opportunities for her. I know in reading about that signing, she was looking into doing more outside of the cage, more like the movie world and stuff like that. So you never know; those opportunities may open up for her. But right now, she can just enjoy her position on the UFC roster. I think she'll be a favorite in most of the matches that she's booked in at this point in time. So again, there's nothing really to balk at if she's considered a gatekeeper at 135 for the women's group, because she can make a lot of money like that, and she can stay around in the UFC because she can beat a lot of people that are put in front of her. Moving on down the weight class, or excuse me, on down the card, the rest of the card was basically used to kind of showcase a lot of the homegrown Japanese talent, and there were some good fights that were held. One individual who definitely stands out to me is Koji Horiguchi. He actually has an interview of his own up on Sherdog as well, where he's calling out Demetrius Johnson because he wants to fight for the 125-pound title. And this was his third win in the UFC. And right now, as that weight class continues to kind of flesh itself out to get some new contenders, I think that's a smart move by him. You already see Chris Carriasso, who was moved into the 178 main event against Johnson. So you see that at flyweight there aren't a lot of contenders, and if Horiguchi can continue making noise, maybe he can get booked against Johnson in Japan sometime next year, because we know that the UFC is going to try to go back at least once a year or so. So that could be good opportunity for him. Not necessarily saying that he would take the win there, but he could put himself in a position where he becomes more of a star within the UFC and within his home country. We're always aware that the UFC is trying to do all they can to cultivate as much Asian talent as they possibly can get together. So this is an opportunity for him to basically place himself at the top of that heat because they're going to need faces as they continue to go back there. And he's only 23 years old too, so he has a lot of growing to do. And he already has 15 fights. So I mean, he's on a very good pace to be someone who is worth watching as a flyweight and as a bantamweight because he competed there too as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's next from him, and hopefully he can continue getting some wins together. I still think he needs maybe one or two before he's considered a number one contender, but he's on the right path right now. And Hyun Gai Lim, he got another knockout win. You know, he fought against Tarek Taffany earlier this year, and he was getting his legs cut out from under him. But the 29-year-old got his one two. And he got his third UFC stoppage by knockout. The first two, there was one by a knee, then there's another by against Pascal Cross that was knees and punches. Both of those were in 2013, and then he finished Takeno Soto this past Saturday with elbows. So this guy is someone who's worth watching. You know, he's at 170 pounds, and he is a pretty good talent. You know, I think he is a dangerous opponent for just about anyone. He's very aggressive, which is good to see within UFC. That's how you definitely make a lot of fans out of the mainstream watchers. So he's someone that is of value. I wish he would have won that fight against Terry Stephanie because that would have kind of put him in a position to demand a bigger fight. But at 170, that's definitely a tough weight class, and there's plenty of guys there for him to be booked against going forward. So this was a good win for him, a good knockout win. Maybe they could get him in there with someone like a Matt Brown or someone like a Ben Saunders who can put on an exciting fight. You know, one of those two guys are going to go completely full throttle against them, and someone's going to get finished. So I think there's a lot of good opportunities for him. For him in his next fight with the UFC. And just looking at the rest of the card, you know, that's the other big thing that caught my eye when I was reviewing everything that went on is Alex Caceres took his second straight loss. You know, he was dominated by Masahiro Kanahara, if I said that right. But man, I had such a Caceres after he defeated Sergio Pettis. I still think he took the short end of the stick when he was thrown in there against Uriah Faber, even though he did well against the California kid. He just didn't have enough for him, and now you know he's took two losses in a row this year, and that's kind of dangerous within the 135-pound group. I think he needs to be booked better. I'm not saying that you're creating fights that you want to see guys win, but he was on a good roll. He had won or almost five straight because one of his fights was overturned due to a failed drug test. But he was on a very, very good roll after dropping down to 135. It's just unfortunate to see all of that momentum brought to a screeching halt ever since UFC 175. So again, you know, we got to wonder what's next for Bruce Leroy because he's one of those characters that kind of look like he was turning the corner within his fight career. Again, he's only 26, so he's another one of those young athletes that has a lot of potential. So we'll see what's next for him. And you know, he's training with MMA Lab now, which I think is very good for his career. So let's just see what's next for this guy, and hopefully he has an opportunity to turn it around. So that's really all we're going to talk about. Looking at UFC Fight Night Nelson versus Hunt. I think it was a good card. Not I'm not sure what the viewership numbers were, seeing how it was so early on Saturday, but still, it is a UFC Fight Pass event, and even though people are complaining about the oversaturation of the sport, this is another one of those examples for the traditional, I guess, North American fan, just because what time it was held, and then B, most of the stars were from that region of the world. So again, I'm not upset at the event. This is something that I wouldn't go back and watch it on UFC Fight Pass. But I definitely think it was a solid offering by the organization, and I don't think that it should be held against them just because fight fans are really upset with the quote unquote quality of fight cards that we're getting over most of 2014. I don't think it was anything to balk at, anything to be upset with, and it's business. This is the sports business that we're in, and UFC is about making as much money as they possibly can, and that includes becoming more of a world entity. So we're going to see more cards like this in the future, whether you want to appreciate it or not. So let's keep the conversation going, and we're going to look at Bellator 125. This fight event was actually on Friday, and let's see, there were a couple of, I guess, conversation points that could be brought out of this event, mainly from the main and co-main event, which featured Melvin Manhoef finally getting his his Bellator win when he knocked out Doug Marshall 2 minutes into the first round. It was a brutal knockout. Definitely, if you have the opportunity to go back and watch and find the highlight of it, it was a ridiculous knockout. Something that kind of is Melvin's mo. We've seen throughout his career. You know, he either puts on a bad fight or he goes in there and he blows someone away, which is exactly what happened to Doug Marshall. It's kind of the same thing with Doug. You know, he's a former WEC champion, and he's been known to knock guys out who either get put out himself. So that's exactly what happened here. It's definitely worth watching, going back and finding the highlight of it because it's one of those knockouts where it's just like it gets people out of their seat. And speaking of knockouts as well, you know, Rafael Carvalho and Brian Rogers are two other guys who are known to knock out opponents or get put out themselves. And this time it was Carvalho getting the win over Brian Rogers, but he knocked him out in a little over 3 minutes in their fight as well. You know, Brian Rogers was someone I was kind of watching because I thought he had an opportunity to really put it together. That fight against Dan Kramer that he had, I want to say that was last year, where him and Dan, it was a very exciting fight. It kind of flew under the radar. A lot of people didn't really pay it much attention, but that was it was a very exciting fight. He definitely goes out there and puts on fights for the fans, but he just can't put together enough of a streak to stay relevant within the sport. So hopefully Bellator keeps him around. You know, with Scott Coker in charge now, I know he sees value in fighters like him. So hopefully he gets to stay around and get some more wins when it comes to competing in Bellator. For Rafael, this was his Bellator debut last night, and it was his 10th straight win. You know, he lost his MMA debut back in 2011, but he put together a good string of wins since then. So he may be somebody to watch within the promotion at the middleweight division. So let's keep. What we're going to do next is we're going to talk about some of the big news stories, I guess, that are coming out about from the MMA world for this past week. And let's see, I got a couple of different options that we're going to talk about. First, I want to talk about Top 20, which started this week. And from what I saw, early reports were that the initial episode hit almost 3 million viewers, which is fantastic. And I think they have an interesting new format that's going on first and foremost with them actually ranking the competitors because if you don't know, this season the women are actually fighting for the what is it, the strawweight title, I believe, 115 pound women's UFC title. I believe that's the strawweight division, but they're, um, they're, the UFC actually went in and ranked the fighters and kind of created fights based off of those rankings, which I think is great because it's like the NCAA tournament. Everyone loves the idea of an upset, and we actually got one when Atisha Torres lost. And she was kind of someone that people were expecting to be in the finals or to stick around this season, but she was upset in the first episode. So it's definitely worth um, an interesting talking point with the way they rank these women and some of the upsets that can happen. So top 20 was a very interesting kickoff to the show. I hope it continues to do well. I know the fact that they have a lot of attractive women on the show, such as Beck Rawlings or Beck, yeah, Beck Rawlings. I think that's her name. Actually, she divorced her husband, and Felice Herrig and some of the others who are definitely very good fighters, but they do have that visual appeal to them as well. I hope that the season continues to do well and people sit down and support this action. I've always said that the Ultimate Fighter kind of needs a change in the way that they're doing the rankings of these fighters and giving them something more to fight for. I think other than just a UFC contract, I think it adds some appeal and it should have a positive effect on the season overall. We'll see as these shows continue to go on. So definitely, you can catch it on. I believe you can catch it on Fight Pass as well too. It's not just on Spike during the week, but you can go back and see the episodes that you may have missed. So let's continue to move on here. And next, I want to talk about is the UFC heavyweight division, and not necessarily the heavyweight division across all of sports, or excuse me, all of MMA, because outside of UFC, you don't really see a lot of valuable heavyweight. Just look at what we see within the UFC. I think it bears worth talking because we've seen two two good heavyweight fights in the last 2 weeks. But again, what do they really mean when you have a weight class that's being run by Cain Velasquez? And that's not saying anything bad about Cain, but this guy has the ability to be a champion for a very very long time. I mean, just looking at the top 10 rankings, he's already beaten JDS. He faces that should be a good fight for him. We'll see what Doom has to offer him, but Kane's going to definitely be the favorite coming in to that fight. Travis Brown just got demolished by Doom, and then you have Josh Barnett, who was just destroyed by Travis Brown. The only other individual, Mark Hunt, he lost to JDS. Arlovsky's just coming back into the UFC. Antonio Silva's already lost twice to Cain Velasquez, and he just lost to Arlovsky. Then you have Roy Nelson that was just destroyed by Mark Hunt, and he was beaten by JDS earlier too. So you have to wonder, like, who, if anyone, is really going to make a run at a champion? Who's going to be someone worth watching next year? You have Stipe Miocic. He is suffering from a back injury, which is very important. It's kind of flying under the radar right now. I think he was just announced for a return fight coming up, but still, like a back injury is something serious when you have someone who is trying to make a run at heavyweight, and he's a small heavyweight as well. So that might be something worth noting. Then you have who else beyond that? You have Todd Duffy, who's 28 years old, but you're never really too sure about what his commitment is to MMA, because I know he's done a little bit of acting, and he's had some injury issues as well. So you have to wonder what's really next for him. Like, is he really going to stick around and be the force that everyone thought he was going to be? Hopefully, he was just announced for an upcoming fight against. Let me see. I'm not sure who he was. Of course. So, but I know Todd Duffy is making a return to the octagon coming up. So you have to wonder though how much is he really going to stick around going forward. Then we also have Jared Rosales, who is, let me see, 3-0 within the UFC. He's on a pretty good run as well. But he recently was defeated by Derek Lewis back in 2012. But that fight was so long ago. You're not really sure how it would go if they face each other now. But he may be someone worth watching. But he hasn't really defeated anyone worth note as well. He fights again next month, or excuse me, November. So if he can put together a win there, perhaps he can kind of gain some attention. But unlike the middleweight division that has Tim Kennedy, Yoel Romero, Luke Rockhold, Jacare Souza, so many guys who are jockeying for a title shot. You have lightweight where you have Gilbert Melendez about to get a shot, Donald Cerrone, Eddie Alvarez, Habib Nurmagomedov, Miles Jury. You have so many guys who are positioning themselves for title shots there. At heavyweight, you have a bunch of guys who Kane has already dominated or who have recently lost, and you have no up and coming fighters. So what's that really mean for the heavyweight division, especially when it continues to get premium placement on a lot of UFC events? Like I said, it's been the main event of the last two cards, and here we have UFC 178 that features probably UFC's most dominant champion right now in Demetrius Johnson defending his title again against Chris Carriazo, and people don't want to see that fight. Why? Because it's the 125-pound men's division, and people don't enjoy watching that group, even though he gets stoppages just as often as some of the other champions. I want to say 2 of his last 3 title defenses have been stoppages, so you can't really be upset with the man when he goes out there and he puts on more exciting fights against tougher opponents than those are available in the heavyweight division. So it's a pretty tough situation to view because it's backwards. It's like people don't want to watch the individuals who will put on interesting fights, and they'd rather sit and watch heavyweights just for the idea or the perception that they're the only guys who consistently deliver knockout victories. And it's funny because even though like the last 2 UFC events didn't feature the best fights, they definitely feature 2 heavyweight knockouts. So again, it's kind of like a balancing act. You got to kind of figure out what goes where. But the MMA heavyweight division is definitely it's at a standstill. Just like heavyweight boxing, you have the Klitschko brothers there, and they're dominating left and right, and they won't fight each other, so you don't really have any interesting fights there. A lot of the value in boxing comes with either Floyd Mayweather or like the middleweight division, the welterweight division. So like a lot of those guys within there are consistently giving the most exciting fights. Exactly the same thing which is going on within the world of MMA. I'm not saying that heavyweights need to be done away with, but they definitely need to be. Their value needs to be lessened, I guess, because they're too much value is being placed on them when you don't have the end result. Even Cain Velasquez, he isn't a big name pay-per-view draw. I want to say he's averaging within that 300 and 400 buys. So we'll see what happens when they go to Mexico later on this year. But still, I'm not too excited about seeing him, or not necessarily seeing him, but seeing some of the opponents that are played against him. And it's funny because that's going to bring me around to my next topic where, I was going to talk about Anthony Johnson being suspended, but he's someone that can move up to heavyweight and be a interesting opponent for Cain Velasquez next year or sometime like that. But that won't be happening anytime soon because he was recently suspended by the UFC. They haven't said why, they haven't said what he was accused of, but rumor that I've been told, this is some of my sources, that it was from allegations of domestic abuse, which is definitely the hot button in professional sports right now because we've seen the whole Ray Rice situation unfold in that within the NFL. They're not playing any games anytime anyone is accused of domestic abuse or charged in any way, shape, or form. They're being placed on the exempt list where they're not allowed to play. They're out indefinitely until Commissioner Roger Goodell gives them permission to play again. So this isn't a joking matter within professional sports right now, and we see that the UFC has kind of taken up that standard as Johnson was announced. His suspension was announced on Friday, and it wasn't even really revealed as to why. Again, like I said, this is rumors and speculation that I was told that from some of our sources that it came from a domestic situation. So again, we're not really sure what's going to happen there. We'll probably get more information over the next coming days, coming weeks, as to why he was suspended. It's interesting too because the UFC also released Thiago Silva again. This is after bringing him back because of the situation that happened with Pablo Popovich and that domestic abuse charges where he supposedly held individuals uh, captive or hostage, excuse me, with a gun because of what happened within the domestic situation. It was all allegations. He was charged, but his wife supposedly fled back to Brazil, which made it difficult for the case to be prosecuted, so all the charges were dropped. And the U.S. responded by re-signing him back to the group a couple weeks ago. So he was released again on Friday. So again, like I said, it definitely shows that across the board in professional sports that no one is really going to tolerate any form of domestic violence. And this isn't just with men being or women, because like Adrian Peterson, he was snatched off of the Vikings roster recently because of this situation involving his son. He was charged with child abuse because he whipped his son with a switch. So again, professional sports aren't playing their it's weird because there are a lot of different questionable situations in sports as well. Like there is a NFL player right now who was suspended 10 games because he accidentally killed his teammate, and he was actually charged and put in jail and served his time in jail, and he is going to be allowed to play back in the league after 10 games. But you have other players who are out indefinitely for what some may see as lesser charges, but that's neither here nor there, and that's an interesting debate topic. But still, this is a situation that's being played around with in professional sports right now. So Anthony Johnson is just another name that added to the list as he's suspended indefinitely from the UFC until his legal situation is held up. And another individual is no longer going to be seen as well as Wanderlei Silva, as he announced his retirement on Friday. And it's while his announcement should be celebrated, and a lot of people did celebrate it, it's his stance that he feels like the UFC kind of took away his love for fighting, which kind of makes it difficult to listen to because he didn't have to get popped for that drug test where he was going to face Cho Sun not too long ago, but that I'm not sure if that necessarily played a part in his idea to retire, but he has walked away from the sport. He will be best known for his time in Pride when he was putting guys away and finishing guys in violent fashion. And he's probably one of the more exciting competitors because the way he fought, the way he kept coming forward, and you knew what kind of fight you were going to get anytime you saw Wanderlei. Should he go into a MMA Hall of Fame if it's ever created? Of course he should. He should be there without any. It should be a unanimous ballot, of course. His UFC run wasn't as exciting, but he definitely, or wasn't as successful, but he definitely put on some exciting fights, whether it was the contest against Quentin Rampage Jackson, the one against Chuck Liddell, anyone man, I remember when he fought Keith Jardine, like he was going to kill that man, but that's what he was known for throughout most of his career, so he called it quits on Friday, and he definitely walked away from the sport, which I'm not sure if it would be the last time, but it definitely seems like it from where we all stand today. So for our next segment, we're going to talk about the upcoming events that the UFC has to offer. We have pretty big card this weekend in UFC 178, and it's unfortunate, because there's all the backstory that everyone's well aware of at this point in time with John Jones and Daniel Cormier being pulled off of this event due to Jones' injury. They've been rescheduled for next year, so that is definitely that was one that was one I guess what's the word I can look for, but I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm saying there, but that was definitely a shot that the card did not need. But instead, they got Demetrius Johnson versus Chris Carriazo, which is the main event. And while it's not as much of a compelling fight, it is an opportunity for us to see Johnson again, who I believe has been the most dominant champion since winning the belt back in the end of 2012. So he's actually tomorrow will be the 2 year reign, 2 year anniversary of his title reign, and this will be his fifth title defense in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, Anthony Pettis still hasn't defended his championship that he won last year, and Ronda Rousey has defended hers. I want to say 4 times, and she's been champion longer than uh, Demetrius Johnson. He's definitely more active than Cain Velasquez, so he's someone that I believe deserves more attention. And he hasn't been like a dominating champion. He had that close fight with Joseph Benavidez to win the belt. He had a close fight against John Dodson, where some people felt like Dodson did enough to win. Then he blew out John Moraga. Then he knocked out Joseph Benavidez again and dominated Ali Bagatino. So he's someone who looks like he's continually getting better every time he steps into the cage. So it'll be interesting to see what Chris Carriazo has to offer him, because again, it was kind of a confusing fight when it was created, because Carriazo was struggling within the weight class, and he's only won 3 fights straight after losing 2 straight to John Moraga and Lucia De Silva. He's beaten guys who aren't necessarily at the near anywhere within the top 15 of the flyweight division. So it's kind of like, why was he put in this fight so quickly? But he's getting his shot. And it's interesting because it's kind of like the TJ Dillashaw story that we saw earlier this year. In my opinion, if Chris Carriazo was able to get the win this Saturday, that would be a bigger upset than Dillashaw defeating Keenan Barral at UFC 173. That's just my opinion of it. I feel like Carriazo was definitely coming out of out of the blue, out of nowhere. TJ was at least a top 10, top 15 competitor, but Carriazo is not even in that group at all. So this is it may not be a competitive fight, and it may very well be. You never know. Some of these guys do step up and they get their opportunity to be on the big stage, so it might be something worth noting as well. But I'm expecting a Demetrius Johnson win. I'm expecting him to get a stoppage, maybe like third or fourth round. He's been getting a lot of late stoppages, except for the one with Joseph Benavidez when he blew him out early in the fight. But I expect a late stoppage because him being able to pour it on. I think he's probably one of the most athletically fit guys in the UFC, and he just continues to get faster and faster as guys start to slow down later on in the fight. So I'm picking him to win via stoppage in the third or fourth round. And that brings us to what may be the real main event of the night, when Donald Cerrone welcomes Eddie Alvarez into the octagon. I can't wait to see Eddie finally take that walk to the cage. I've been very supportive of him as one of the top lightweights outside of the UFC, and I think he's one of the best 155-pound guys in the sport today. But this is where we find out if I was correct or not, because he has a very tough task in Cerrone. And if he can get the win, especially if he knocks Cerrone out in the first round or something like that, you can expect him to be considered the number one contender for the UFC's lightweight title, even though obviously he hasn't been competing in the octagon for an extended period of time. But I'm looking forward to this fight because it opens up, a win for Eddie Alvarez opens up so much for the sport. We may get to see him face Gilbert Melendez, which has been in talks for years, because they've been going back and forth for years. Him against him against Anthony Pettis, him against Khabib Nurmagomedov, against Miles Jury, against so many different guys that will pose uh, great matchmaking. And then you have Donald Cerrone here, who's I don't want to say quietly just been putting together win after win because he's been destroying guys all year. But he's one of those guys who fans rally around just because of the way he goes out there and he basically competes at the highest level every time he's in the cage. So this is a great fight. And it's definitely, unfortunately, it's the co-main event here, but this could have been a UFC on Fox main card right here that everyone would have wanted to see. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing these two guys here. I am going to, this goes against what I want to do because I never really pick guys who are coming into the octagon for the first time. I just think that a lot of them deal with, a lot of them struggle when placed on and were placed under under such great lights for their first fight. But I'm going to take Eddie Alvarez um, for the win. I think it'll be a back and forth fight. I think Cerrone's definitely going to have his moments, but I'm going to take Eddie to get the win on Saturday. And then before these two guys get in the cage, we still have Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor, which is kind of flying under the radar right now. But these two guys are going to go at it when they step into the octagon on Saturday. This is going to be a real test for Conor McGregor because everyone's saying, he hasn't beaten anybody of value yet, but he has such a huge following. So many different fans are pushing for him to get a more greater spot on the UFC roster. So this is an opportunity here when he's facing Dustin Poirier, who's within the top 10 of the featherweight division. If Conor can come out here and beat Poirier, especially if you beat him and embarrass him, as their feud gets more and more intense, that'll be an opportunity for him to say, "Hey, I'm here," and he can get a more prominent fight in the featherweight division. For Dustin here, this is Dustin's opportunity to prove that he is of the elite when it comes to the 145-pound weight class. So him and McGregor have been going back and forth at each other for years, and at least the last year or so. So this is something that's definitely worth watching. Then before this fight, man, this card is stacked. We have Dominic Cruz and Takeya Mizugaki, who, this is Cruz's first fight back since 2012, I believe. Let me check. No, 2003 years. And his last fight actually was a win over Demetrius Johnson before he dropped down to flyweight. So that shows you how long ago this guy has been in the cage. He's been suffering from, his knees been tore up and his body rejected the surgeries that was put in front of him. Then finally he got healthy again. Then he was getting ready for a comeback and he was injured again. So he'll be stepping into the cage for the first time on Saturday. I'm sure it's going to be an exciting moment for him and his fans. And he's coming in against Takeya Mizugaki, who's also flying under the he's put on. I want to say he's 5 straight. It's funny. Last guy he lost to was Chris Carriazo, but he's gotten 5 straight wins, and he kind of is flying under the radar at 135. So I think this is it's a good fight for Cruz. I'm gonna take him. Actually, no, I'm gonna take that back. I'm gonna talk about my pick in a minute, but I think this is a very tough fight for Cruz to welcome himself back into the UFC because this isn't a gimme fight in any way, shape, or form. He's gonna have the advantage when it comes to height and reach against Mizugaki, but man, being out of the octagon for 3 years, I think is a talking point that can't be ignored because anytime I've always said I wanted to see like a win-loss record for guys who are out of action for an extended period of time and when they come back, because even when guys are gone for a year, you see them not necessarily perform as well when they're welcome back for that first fight. Cruz has been gone for 3 years, but he's saying that this is the first time that he's really been healthy, 100% healthy coming into the cage. So we'll see if he still has his trademark movement and if he still has his speed, which made him such a dominant champion for an extended point of time. If he gets the win here and if he gets a big win, he may put himself in a position that he can demand a shot at the belt that he never lost, and he can reactivate that rivalry with Team Alpha Male. He's got that win over Uriah Faber, and he also has that loss to Faber as well. So that'll be a key talking point there. But this is a big fight for Dominic Cruz at UFC 178. I am going again. I'm going to go against what I normally do. I'm going to pick Cruz in this fight just because I think he was such a great fighter when he was at his best, and I don't think I think the time off he'll have to get his bearings back, but I think he'll be able to do that around before the time frame is up. I think he'll take a decision win against Takea on Saturday. So I'm going to go against my traditional picking methods, and I'm going to pick Cruz via unanimous decision. Man, in this fight, in this card is just getting better and better because now we have Tim Kennedy and Yoel Romero. This fight right here may mess around and be a preliminary card bout, like not even on the pay-per-view, but it features Kennedy and Yoel, who can be considered the next guy in line for a title shot after either Luke Rocco and Jacare Sosa. Kennedy is going to be at a wrestling disadvantage against Romero, but I think he'll have the experience edge. Me personally, I joke about Yoel all the time, but I'm waiting on him to hit like a power bomb or tombstone power driver, some like professional wrestling move in the middle of the octagon, because the way he just made these guys whenever he grabs a hold of them is just something worth watching. And I think Kenny's going to have to be very careful about that because he has been known to try to wrestle guys before in the past, but he doesn't want to try to wrestle Yoel in any way, shape, or form. He's just going to end up getting tossed around the cage for sure. But we've seen Yoel struggle because Derek Brunson, I believe, Derek Brunson took a first and second round off of him before Romero got the third round stoppage. So this goes without saying that he isn't unstoppable. He can definitely be put in his place if a smart veteran like Kennedy gets the lead and has the ability to put together some key positions. So again, I think this is a fight that Kennedy can win. I'm going to pick him in this fight as well, just because I think he's too smart of a fighter. That's something I don't think is appreciated in martial arts. The way he fights, and he does so at his own pace, and he does so very intelligently. I think he'll be able to use his jiu-jitsu to kind of keep himself off of his back. I think he's definitely going to score on the feet, and I just think I just see him being able to win this fight. People kind of counted him out when he fought Michael Bisping, but he did more than enough to dominate Michael across 25 minutes. So I just think he'll do enough to win 2 of the 3 rounds against Yoel Romero on Saturday. And we also have some other important fights this weekend. We have James Carlson, Jorge Masvidal, which I think it'll be this is a good lightweight fight here. I'm taking Masvidal in that one. We have Kat Zingano against Amanda Nunes. I'm going to take Amanda Nunes in this fight here because I just feel like she has been on a better run. And again, she's been staying a little bit more active than actually her and Kat Zingano have both been out of the cage for an extended period of time. So this is a big fight for both of them here. I think if Kat gets the win, actually I think the winner of this fight period will be the next contender for Ronda Rousey. But I think people are leaning towards Kat because they would like to see her get that fight that she was promised after she defeated Miesha Tate and then suffered from her husband committing suicide and then the knee injury she suffered through. So she's been out of the cage for a little more than a year as well. So this is her opportunity to kind of get back into the limelight here. Then who else we have? We have Brian Ebersol and John Howard, Patrick Cote and Stephen Thompson. That's a fight I'm looking forward to because I've always been interested in watching Stephen Thompson fight. He has the potential to put guys out, and he goes out there sometimes and doesn't put everything together. So Cote is definitely a wily veteran who has challenged for the title. And this is an important fight for Patrick Cote. You got Manny Gamburian still competing against Cody Gibson. This is an important fight for the young Cody Gibson, so that's good there. And you also have John Tuck and Kevin Lee. So UFC 178 is definitely worth your what, $60 or whatever it may be. And if you don't watch it that way, go to a local bar and catch it there because it's going to be a good card from top to bottom. I believe there's a lot of fights here that have some emotional value to them too, such as the Poirier and McGregor fight. There's Alvarez coming into the UFC for the first time, and don't forget, you still have Mighty Mouse at the top of the card, and he's someone that's worth watching. Shouldn't be overlooked. So I think that this card has a lot of value from top to bottom. Uh, and Bellator, actually, they have a card on Saturday too as well. And as in Shimeko is looking to kind of turn around his career after that embarrassing loss to Tito Ortiz that he fights Brandon Housey. He's definitely going to be, man, this is crazy. Shimeko has more losses than Housey has total fights in his career, which is crazy. So I definitely expect him to get it, to pull out the win there. Patricky Freire returns to competition. Bubba Jenkins, someone who I think is being brought along at the right pace. He's fighting this weekend. He kind of, after he lost to he recently lost to a couple years ago to Burley back in 2013, but he's put together 3 straight wins since. I definitely think he's someone worth watching. He's coming along at the right pace. He's only 26 years old. He'll always have that high level of wrestling behind him. So give him some time. Give him maybe like another 2 years to see what he ends up doing as a mixed martial arts artist before he's counted out as quickly as a lot of people did. But again, Bellator's card won't feature as much as many top name talents, but Scott Coker and his team are definitely putting together some interesting fights there, just to kind of using the talent that they have on board. So, to close out the show today, we're just going to talk about what we have coming up on MMA ratings. Obviously, we're going to have our fights to make these from the cards this weekend. We're going to talk about just some of the next fights that we think will work for a lot of the fighters that competed this past weekend. And I'm also probably going to look at the importance of the Donald Cerrone and Eddie Alvarez fight. Maybe do a piece on Demetrius Johnson as well. I think he deserves some attention, but there's so much value in that UFC 178 card that it'll be a team effort to make sure we get on everything. So be sure to check out MMAratings.net every day because we usually post content on a daily basis. So you can definitely catch us there. Check us out there. Follow us on Twitter at MMAratings.net and follow us on Instagram as well. And you can follow all of the writers. It's myself at R Garcia underscore sports. And you can follow Roy Billington at Roy underscore Billington. And follow Adam Martin on Twitter as well. Nathan McCarter and Michael Ford. We are the brains behind MMAratings.net. So be sure to check us out there. If you have any questions, you can follow us on Twitter, contact us there, shoot us emails. We're always very responsive to any kind of information we get back. So again, this is Raphael Garcia. Roy Billington, he just actually contacted me, so I'm not even going to talk to him right now after the show's over. But he'll be back next week, and we'll be back talking about a big UFC event from this past week. And hopefully, we have no tomfoolery to talk about injuries or anything like that. Hopefully, this is a card that goes off without a hitch. But it's going to be a great event. So be sure to pinch yourself in front of the television to watch. This is Raphael Garcia, and have a great day. And have a great day.